All right, so let's set the stage here. You are looking at a franchise concept. You're pretty far into it. How do you really know if that market's viable? So Mike, like what would be the first step? Like how would you look at the viability of a market?
Yeah, honestly, if it's a brick and mortar, I'm hiring an agent, right? Someone that makes a living off of knowing that area. What are comps? What is rent? All that kind of stuff. Because the fastest way to break a budget is go over on construction cost or be locked into a 10-year lease that's way out of whack with what that item 19 looks like.
Well, to piggyback on what Mike said, how does the agent know what you're looking for, right? You go to the franchisor. The franchisor's got a list of demographics that they know works, right? So first thing we want to do is we want to say, okay, franchisor, what type of customer am I looking for, right? We're going to give that to the local agent in a physical location concept. And we're going to ask the franchisor, what software, what mapping tool do you have to show me if that demographic is here so I can map it out? For instance, I own a franchise that looks for a certain demographic of education and income, right? And so when we're looking for the physical location, we want to say how many people that make this amount of money that have this level of education are within a 3-mile radius of here. So this software can typically say, hey, here's a pocket in your city, and here's a pocket in your city, and here's a pocket in your city that would work, and then we can go give that to the real estate agent. But remember, the franchisor not only has the experience of what works in the software to show you if they're there typically, but they're also motivated to be sure that your business succeeds, right? They don't want you to close. Now they're not producing royalties out of there anymore, and they don't want that to be part of their validation process.
Yep, I agree. Here's my favorite. It's being lazy. Don't be lazy. And what I mean by that is go shop your competition. So let's say you're investing in a fence franchise. What should you be doing? Well, I would call every competitor. I'd go on Google. I'd find every competitor. I'd call them. I'd get quotes, see what that whole experience is like. Let's say it's a fitness concept. I'm going to go to my competitors. I'm going to take the classes. I'm going to do it. Don't get lazy with it. I mean, so many people just trust the franchisor, which is great, but you also need to verify. Trust but verify, right? Like you got to verify that this is true and that you may be going into a situation where you have a great competitor. Like you don't know that until you go in, experience it for yourself, and see what really happens.
Yep, absolutely. Another one that I can think of right now is just think about the geography that you're going to. And if you're one of the first in that geography, you better study a little more. And what I mean is imagine if you own a tree service franchise, right? Cutting trees down in Minnesota is a heck of a lot than cutting them down in South Texas or South Florida, right? So if you're going to one of those markets, go look at what the competition is doing. Make sure the franchisor understands how to service trees down there so they can train you. They've got the proper equipment. Talk to other franchisees if they're in similar markets to understand some of the challenges. What about, we've represented Mosquito brands. Yep. Mosquitoes in certain parts of the country, wooded versus, next to the ocean or whatever, is going to be very different. So if you're one of the first in a market, again, let's shop the competition. Let's talk to other franchise brands even, or whatever we need to make sure if I'm going to be a pioneer in this market, I feel really confident that the service is needed.
Yeah, let me tell you real quick about a story. One of my clients, she was in LA. She was thinking about a franchise. We narrowed this thing down. We got it down to mosquitoes. And we're both like, interesting. So we did some research. We went to LA Times. We read some articles about the mosquito kind of infestation that was happening in LA, which I didn't know about, but we did some research for her. We got this data and she's like, I'm in, let's go, let's do this thing. And she's a hustler, she's great. So she decided to go into LA, limited competition in LA. We did some research on that, Google reviews, there was a couple people, but honestly nothing substantial. And now she does a really good job in Northern LA in Thousand Oaks market.
I remember when I opened my first franchise, it was Anytime Fitness, like I've shared, in a town, Fremont, Nebraska, which this is a town of about 25, 30,000 people, right? And it has the second largest YMCA in the country here. I mean, this thing is a beast. And it had just within the 6 months of me opening, put in a brand new fitness center. And so I had heard that these kind of smaller and middle markets were working really well for Anytime Fitness at the time. So I was excited to go to the market, but at the same time, I'm scared to death. It's my first franchise. I'm up against the second largest YMCA in the country. But what I did is I went into market and I started asking people, and I started to find out there was a tremendous amount of industry that worked overnight, right? A lot of manufacturing plants, a lot of food plants. And all of a sudden they were saying they can't get into the YMCA at that time. So then I started to build confidence. I started to do some math and I said, you know what, this thing is going to work. So even though I was up against a huge competitor that had more amenities than I did, they did not have the one thing that I did, which was 24-hour service that was a need in that market. And that Anytime Fitness ended up doing fantastic.
Brings up a great point because one of the power of franchising is it's likely in your own market, right? So you know that market better than anybody. So for you to go in there and have those conversations, that's not something a big national company can do typically. So you know your market better than anybody. Go in there, use your network, and figure out if there's a need. Like that's a huge win for franchising as a whole. You have a huge leg up on the competition.
Yeah, and that goes back to if you're in the market, you have that that leg up on the competition. But let's talk a little bit about proximity. Yeah. What do you guys feel about the idea of opening a franchise where you live versus your ability to do it in another market?
Yeah, I think it comes down to self-awareness, right? Early in my career, I did open one that was really far away. I made it there less. I made every excuse in the book to not make it up there. And that one didn't do as well as the one that was literally 2 blocks from the house. I could be there. I had a better relationship with my customers. I had a better relationship with my employees. Now, fast forward 10 more years. Now I have the skill set. Back then I didn't. So it's being self-aware and knowing who you do have in market, right? Who your operator is, because you're clearly not flying there every day to service that customer. So who your operator is and knowing your skill set and seeing if it's at that level to do that.
Proximity is key. I mean, or you always want to be in your backyard if you can. I had a similar concept, a similar situation that honestly I was 2.5 hours away, and it on paper looked like the best opportunity ever. Like A++ location, brand new location, everything that I wanted to market, but I didn't know it well enough. Like looking back, I didn't know that market well enough. Opened this thing up. It's my only one that really didn't do very well. And honestly, looking back is because I didn't understand that market well enough because it was just too far away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The last thing that I can think of too is just think about how you acquire customers or what type of business is going on compared to what you're doing. So again, you kind of talked about it already, knowing your market, but think about if you're a restoration brand and you get the majority of your customers through insurance companies, right? Are there enough insurance companies locally that you can go network with that will then push you customers whenever they've got water, fire, mold that needs remediated? Or think about, for instance, we've got a franchise that does temporary wall solutions. Well, what has to be going on in your market in order to have temporary walls? You got to have a lot of construction projects. Is this a growing and dynamic market that's going to have a lot of growth? Or is it not? If it's not, you're not going to have the customer base that you need. Or for instance, let's say that you're in fundraising, and in fundraising, you need a certain number of schools, right? Are the schools there? Are they growing? Do they care about their sports enough in order to go raise money, right? Those are the types of things that you need to think about. How do I get my customer? And is that type of business happening in my market?
Last one for me is just legal. Think about legal ramifications of like local municipalities, state laws, that kind of thing. That could play into it as well. So just understand those on a micro level.
I ran into this. A friend of mine was looking at a car wash, and he wasn't thinking about the water restrictions in the town. So that significantly changed his thoughts on how successful.
100%. Yeah, same thing. I live in Colorado, the West, right? So they shut off water in August sometimes. No car washes. I mean, that would be detrimental for a business owner.